Hey, what is up, guys, and welcome to another Naked Convo with. Today we have a special guest, Sarah Jane, as the Naked Yogi, and we're going to be talking a little bit about who is the woman behind the project, The Naked Yogi, and a little bit about her personal information, her experience in naturism, and so on. And as I explained at the beginning of every Naked Convo with, due to censorship issues, we have to do this addressed. But I think that the information that we're going to cover here is more valuable than actually having a naked conversation. So I plan on sharing this or having the possibility of sharing this cross platform. Sarah, Sarah Jane,
hmm
what do you prefer?
Sarah Jane. Sarah Jane.
Sarah.
I also sometimes go by SJ.
Well, thank you for joining us. Thank you for accepting this invitation. How are things going in lockdown?
They're going all right. I'm really happy to be near the end. I'm near the end of a quarantine. Obviously, like businesses are still shut down to some degree, but um, I am excited to leave my apartment.
That sounds like fun. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what 2021 brings is a little bit of hope. I'm not sure if we've seen the worst of it, but we definitely have an idea that there's an end that is near. Maybe once vaccinations are more wide available, we can go back to some level of normality, whatever that means. I think that what's normal now is nothing going to be like it was before, but at least we can socialize a little bit more. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the social aspect of this lockdown is probably what has been affecting me more than anything else.
Yeah, I feel that as well. I'm a big extrovert, like to the degree that this will sound so crazy to some people, but there was one time that I had like a difficult therapy appointment, and so I needed to recover after. So I
Mhm.
walked around downtown and started conversations with like four strangers because that's like healing to me and it's
Mhm.
rejuvenating and so to be in a position where I'm not able to see people as frequently or in as large groups or meet strangers or
Yeah.
that has definitely affected my energy.
Yeah. And especially I consider myself to be a very like physical person. I like hugging people. I like being close to people. I like, just the physical and social interaction. And now I can't even shake hands or anything. It's just like a little touch.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
the distance and not being able to see people as frequent as I'd like, or the events, not having events seems very hard on us.
I often think about like raves and dances
Mhm.
where there would just be like hundreds of sweaty bodies like
Yeah.
packed together in a tiny area, and we'd all be like moving on rhythm together. And that's just like, oh God, it gets me so fired up. That's one of the things that I miss the most because I have been able to maintain like my intimate
Mhm.
relationships and still be fed in that way, in a soul way. But yeah, physicality is huge for me. I mean, obviously, like I teach yoga because for me, like being connected to my physical self in a way that is like enriching rather
Mhm.
than like self effacing or self denigrating in any way. To be in a positive relationship with my body
Yeah.
brings so much into stability. It brings my mind into stability, my spirit, my like able to be present socially, all just
Mhm.
my other hobbies, like everything just seems a little bit more balanced when I'm physically connected with myself and when I'm physically connected with others. So that has definitely been a change. I am very lucky to live with a partner though, so I get lots of cuddles. But
Mhm.
I imagine that this would be a very hard time to be single,
Oh
because then
yeah.
most of your physical touch comes from people that you're not living with,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah, I agree. I think the fact that I've been in lockdown with my wife has made it easier. And we've had like a little bit of relaxing sometimes of measures. In my city, sometimes everything is closed, sometimes some things are closed and open. So we try with all the security measures possible to have some level of interaction with friends, family, and things like that, so we don't go crazy. But we do try to be on the safe side, especially now that the cases are getting worse and worse. But I hope this is like the last bump, and then things hopefully start improving. But
Yeah.
tell me a little bit about yourself, Sarah. Sarah Jane, how did this yoga? How did you discover yoga, and how did you discover that it was your passion? And then, you know, how did that become naked yoga and so on?
Mm-hmm. Um, the first time I ever did yoga would have been at like a YMCA class. I think I just dropped in with my mom one day or something like that. And I remember being kind of amazed by it because I was very athletic. I was
Mhm.
in what could be called, you know, my height. I was playing competitive soccer, representing my city. I was like running all the time. I was, you know, like working out with machines, and obviously I had a lot of training through the soccer team that I was on. So I was like in what could have been a peak physical condition. And then I saw this woman in her 40s who was able to do these yoga poses so much better than me. Like I was just shocked. I assumed that athleticism was, um, I guess I just had a more limited scope of what athleticism could be. I thought it was like the fastest you can run. That's how you measure how athletic you are, or you know the most weight that you can press, or something like that. So the first thing that interested me about yoga was the way that time is your friend. You know, a lot of people age out of a lot of different forms of athleticism, but age into yoga, which I love. But I didn't really start doing yoga regularly at that point. That was just kind of my first taster. I started doing yoga regularly in my second year of university. The person I was dating at the time went to a local hot yoga studio and invited me there, and I loved it. I loved the experience, just like in total, um, like
What
a
is hot yoga?
subjective emo. Sorry.
What is hot yoga?
Oh, so it's when you practice yoga in a room that is like humidified. So it's like very hot. The temperature is like the hottest summer day, and it's really humid. So it takes some time to learn how to actually just be in the room comfortably, let alone practice yoga in the room. So
Mhm.
it takes a few weeks of regular experience before you can like breathe in a normal way, and before you stop sweating profusely. Like the first
Mhm.
couple times I did hot yoga, my body was so slippery that I'd try to put like my foot against my leg or something like that for tree pose, and I would just be like slipping.
Mhm.
But with steady practice, like the body acclimatizes to those conditions. So I enjoyed the experience, just like it was pleasurable. You know, the yoga teachers were skilled, so they were able to create an environment that was soothing while also being challenging.
Mhm.
Um, but the thing that made yoga just particularly astounding to me at that time is that I was still playing soccer competitively. I was playing for my university at that time. And I had an injury that I was going to a physiotherapist for. And after just one hot yoga session, I went to my next physiotherapy appointment, and the therapist was amazed. She was like, "What did you do? Your healing has progressed so much since I saw you a few days ago. What happened?" And I
Mhm.
was like, "Well, I did hot yoga." And she's like, "Yeah, that makes sense." You know. Um, so that was kind of what like flipped the switch in my mind that this is something that's really special. And I continued to practice regularly. Uh, and my experience of it grew. Like I started practicing yoga regularly because it was physically healing and physically challenging. But what kind of made the love grow was the effect that it had on me mentally, calming me down, because I had often used exercise as a way of releasing like stored up emotional energy, like repressed emotional energy.
Mhm.
So the way, like often, for example, I would like gather up all my anger into myself and then use it to tackle harder in soccer, use it to
Mhm.
sprint harder, that kind of thing. But it's just not, it doesn't align me, right? To be aligned in my heart, I need to let the anger go and dissipate into the ether, and then I can be at peace.
Mhm.
And that's really what yoga gave me, was it gave me an opportunity to be very physical, and to challenge myself physically, but to soothe. And so that's what got me into practicing yoga regularly.
And
And
how did
then
that
so
become naked yoga?
it became naked yoga when I started practicing at home. Pretty simple, because I would often practice in the morning. So I
Mhm.
would just roll out of bed, and I had been sleeping naked for years. So I would just roll out of bed, throw on a YouTube video about yoga or whatever, and just practice right there in my bedroom, just naked.
Mhm.
And so then when I decided, when I was finishing my degree and looking forward to entering the workforce, um, I knew that I wanted to work online, uh, and I thought about it some more. I thought, yoga is what I want to do no matter what. So I could do yoga online, and I do yoga naked at home, and I know that I'm not the only one. Like it was just kind of an intuitive sense. It's not like I was connected with a community of naked yoga practitioners. I
Mhm.
just had this intuition, like nudity and yoga go so well together.
They do.
So like there are lots of people who feel so alone just because they aren't represented, right? There's so much
Mhm.
conversation about representation in media. And I was kind of seeing that with naked yoga. Like I know that people are practicing this, and I know that people are not talking about it.
Yeah.
So I can do that, and that's just kind of where the naked yogi was born.
So did you have to pass through any psychological or emotional progress in order for you to be okay with people seeing you nude online doing yoga? Or was that something that came natural? Like, what was your relationship with your body growing up that led you to this?
I think, well, I was very comfortable with the idea of being nude online, from the outset. Um, Honestly, not because of the way that I was socialized in a young way that would encourage this kind of freedom,
Mhm.
but actually because I was socialized in a way that discouraged this kind of freedom, and I had a rebel spirit.
So you grew up in a conservative family that probably hid the body and shamed it a little?
A little bit. My parents themselves were a little bit more free than the rest of my community, but I was raised in an evangelical Christian community,
Mhm.
that did definitely shame the body and shame things related to the body. So
Yeah.
what I experienced more than body shame in that community was sexual shame,
Mhm.
but then bodies were also treated as inherently sexual.
Yeah.
So where sexual shame lived, body shame lived.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really for some people it's really hard to separate them. We've been taught that they're part of the same thing to the degree that separating nudity from eroticism or sexuality, for some people it's just mind-blowing.
Yeah, and I had a conversation with my dad, which I'm willing to talk about because I actually mentioned it on another podcast, so now it's public. And
Okay.
him and I have like spoken about it since, and it's healed. But when I was first telling him about this business idea, he actually said that it was immoral, which is like a pretty heavy judgment from a family where morals are like the
Yeah.
highest priority. Being raised in a Christian community, it doesn't matter that much if you're like successful or smart, but it matters so much if you're moral. So
Yeah.
to hear that, it was very painful at the time. Um, and it was precisely because he thought that I was becoming a sex worker, which I mean, I want to be clear. I don't think that sex work is wrong, but
Mhm.
that's not what I'm doing. Like he misunderstood that
Yeah.
because I'm being nude, he thought I was being a sex worker.
And that brings me to another question. How, I think, well, I've seen some expressions of naked yoga online, and some are much more oriented towards the normalization of the body, but others are very, very heavily eroticized. So when you were thinking of this process of what you wanted to do, why did you not decide to go to a more erotic approach, or why, what was the thought process that went into choosing the type of naked yoga you wanted to um, share online?
I chose the way that I practiced, truthfully. Like it didn't even occur to me to bring erotica into yoga because that wasn't my experience of yoga
Hmm.
previously. Um, I, in fact, often like when I'm deep in a yoga practice, which happens more when I'm receiving guidance than when I'm guiding. When I'm teaching yoga, I'm like focused with being a teacher. But when I'm following someone else's guidance, my mind is totally clear of the cares of the world. So I'm not thinking about sex. I'm not thinking about romance. I'm not thinking about career. I'm not thinking about this, that, or the other thing. I'm just feeling my sensations. I'm feeling my body and I'm feeling my breath. So just erotica just
Does it?
didn't
It doesn't
just
fit.
didn't apply.
Hmm.
Yeah. And that doesn't mean it can't. Some people, when they're in that state of calm, might feel like an energetic surge that they interpret as like a sexual or erotic energy.
Hmm.
For me, the surge that I felt was just peace. So yeah, erotica just didn't apply to me.
So it just happened to, I mean, this happened to be your experience, and you decided that you wanted to share that same experience with the world.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's interesting
I,
the way that you've explained this before of how you got into this. Seems that you had something you loved that you wanted to share, that you wanted to turn into a career, and then you happened to stumble upon a couple of communities: the naked yoga community, the nudist or naturist or nudie, or the wide variety of people that like to take off their clothes, and how well naked yoga fits with this audience. Were you surprised when you started sharing your work, like when these communities found you?
I was surprised. Really, I wasn't surprised to be like found, I guess, by the nudist or naturist communities, because I mean that's really the niche that I'm operating in.
Hmm.
Um, what I was surprised about was just how friendly and welcoming it was. Like I was offered gigs like within probably weeks of launching my first ever Instagram account. Like
Hmm.
my photos were grainy, like there wasn't quality. I didn't have any product that I was selling yet. I was really just posting pictures, gauging interest, and already people were like, "Yes, we are about this. Your message seems clear and non-sexual and we want to support you. We want to give you business opportunities and help you grow." And I was just so surprised. I thought that I would have to be like vying for those opportunities, like pitching myself and this kind of
Hmm.
stuff. And people were just handing them to me on a silver platter. It was really amazing how much people wanted to help me out. I was really appreciative of it.
So for all of those who are wondering, you can find Sarah Jane at Natural Body Yoga on Instagram specifically, and the rest of the platforms she appears as the Naked Yogi, or some variation of that.
Hmm.
We can I can mention the rest of the social medias as we continue the conversation. But um, were you familiar with the naturist community before you started naked yoga?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, I had experienced some social nudity within just like my circle of friends,
Mhm.
but not within a specifically naturist community or organization or anything like that.
Tell us about
Uh,
those experiences. How did you start social nudity? Because being naked and doing yoga in your room is one thing, but hanging out with other people naked is, completely, well, I wouldn't say completely different, but it does take a mental process.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, each circumstance was a little bit different, and in none of, well, most of the circumstances, we weren't just all naked and chilling for a long period of time.
Mhm.
There was like perhaps like partial nudity for specific reasons. Like one of my first socially naked experiences was some of my girlfriends and I in high school were sharing our body insecurities, specifically about our breasts. And
Mhm.
we all thought that our breasts were just so bizarre looking and we must all be freaks and this kind of stuff. And it occurred to one of us, we can't all be freaks, that, if there's a normal, we could figure that out right now. So we all just took off our shirts and like looked at each other's breasts and we're like, oh, we're all different. It's not like everybody is the same except for one of us. Like we are all so different. Um, and
Either
so it just
nobody's
kind
a
of
freak or we're all freaks.
exactly, exactly. And so that was a very liberating experience. Um, Actually, that wasn't one of my first experiences. That was just one of the, I suppose, more profound experiences.
Mhm.
Earlier than that, I had like skinny dip with friends multiple times. The first time, there was definitely a feeling of like, we're being naughty or something,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
But quickly it became comfortable and it was just completely unthreatening. Like, why were we so worked up about this in the
That's
first
probably
place?
one of the biggest surprises when you have your first like social nude experience. It's very difficult to undress in the beginning. Like if you know it's something that's going to happen, all your emotional energy, like all your everything you're thinking about is that it can go wrong or whatever. You have a lot of insecurities. And then the moment that you're going to take off your clothes, you're like really, really nervous. And then you take off your clothes. And then after like a couple minutes, it's just like, how did I get so worked up for something that now feels so natural?
Yeah, yeah, totally. Your early nudist experiences were quite different from mine, weren't they? Did I hear that you
Yeah.
went to like a naked bike ride or something? So like very organized event type thing?
Yeah, I mean, well, I haven't shared all of my naturist experiences or nude experiences. It's really weird because when I grew up, I wasn't a nudist. I didn't know it existed or anything. I think I received a traditional education when it came to body and nudity. I didn't grow up seeing my parents nude. I didn't, they didn't see me nude after a certain age. So, but I never felt self-conscious. I never felt like there was something inherently wrong with my body. And I remember that when I was in middle school, there were a couple of experiences like when people challenge you to do certain things that require undressing to a certain level. Um, I would do it. And I thought it was a little fun and exciting, but didn't think much of it. And when I found out that this World Naked Bike Ride existed, I immediately felt like my heart beat and like, this is something I want to do. And I was excited and nervous, but I didn't know what to expect. And I thought that it's just weird how many insecurities you have. And mostly as a man, the main insecurity is what if I get an erection, or what if my penis isn't big enough, or what if, because we're taught that our penises in a certain extent represent our masculinity. So
Right.
if we have a small penis, then, it's going to be horrible and everyone's going to, you know, laugh at you or whatever. Or like, for example, if you get an erection, but it's not appropriate, or what if everyone
Right.
has an erection? And, just these things that people, I mean, that you're influenced to believe, but you don't understand why. And then that, but then I remember that when I did decide to take off my clothes, like no one cared, no one noticed, no one. So that was relieving. And
Hmm.
and then how quickly you forget that you're naked, especially when it's during a World Naked Bike Ride. People are riding their bikes, and there's like a big celebration going on. So there's this collective vibe, and you get connected to that collective vibe, and you forget completely that you're naked or that other people are naked. And then the sad part, when it's all over,
And you get dressed.
start dressing, and you're like, no.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
want it to last a little bit longer. So yeah, it was a little bit different than your experience.
Hmm. Hmm. Something that I found interesting, or like a connection between our stories, is that I saw somewhere, I don't remember precisely where, that one of the things that interested you in going to that naked bike ride was the um, prospect of seeing naked women. and that was like
Oh yeah.
titillating,
Oh
right?
yeah.
Yeah, and then this experience transformed for you into something that was like significantly more meaningful
Hmm.
than just that like brief titillation of like, oh, pretty ladies or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's something that I see regularly with the work that I do. Like, especially having my subscriptions available on OnlyFans in addition to Patreon.
Hmm.
For me, like, I don't I don't see like a major difference on my end between the two platforms because both of them just allow me to distribute subscription
Hmm.
based content.
Is
Simple as
your
that,
audience
right?
different?
The audience is a little bit different because OnlyFans has a reputation to be used for sex work.
Yes.
So even though the content that I distribute on both sites is exactly the same, and there are lots of people on OnlyFans that don't do sex work, I get more people subscribing to my account on OnlyFans, expecting it to be sex work.
Yeah.
Um, and so on there, especially, though also on Patreon, I receive a lot of messages from people that say things like, I want to be honest with you, and I hope this doesn't offend you. I started subscribing because I thought that you were hot. But after watching a few of your videos, I've actually started practicing yoga, and it's been really changing my life.
Wow.
You
That's
know, and it's
awesome.
really moving when I hear those messages because I'm like, that's exactly what I wanted. Like, I
Yeah.
knew that people, because we have this cultural obsession with nudity, especially with like female nudity as a sexual object, um, I knew that people were going to come to me with the expectation of sexuality. And
Yeah.
so my hope was that I could just keep their attention long enough to give them something much more.
I completely agree with that way of thinking, and that's why I don't like to focus my energy on banning people from Twitter just because they have a very sexualized profile. Um, I think that, well, I see it from two different perspectives. For one, I feel like people create alternative profiles to do everything that they can't do in their real life because of being afraid of being, outcasted or prosecuted or judged or whatever. So I feel like they accumulate all the things that are not socially accepted in one profile, and
Mhm.
it tends to be really heavily charged on pornography. And the other thing is that I feel that sometimes people might have this initial impulse to seek this type of content out of some kind of sexual kink or whatever. And then, if some people say that this doesn't happen, but if the content that I'm providing gives them some level of value, someday they might understand where I'm coming from. And I don't have a problem with sexuality or a problem with eroticism or a problem with different types of communities or even pornography or anything like that. It's just that I like to focus my message on the aspect of nudity that I want to promote. And I understand that there's a wide variety of different um, perspectives. And I don't think that some are good and some are bad, or some are right or some are wrong. I actually really enjoy the fact that people have variety to choose. But specifically, the message that I'm trying to send out to the world are the benefits of non erotic social nudity. And the reason I like non erotic social nudity is because I feel like it's inclusive.
Mhm.
If the moment that you add sex into the mix, well, you immediately divide all the different sexual preferences and expressions that exist, but you're also segregating by age. And I don't
Oh,
think that
big
this is
time.
something that should only be available for adults. Children can grow up with the benefits of not having a negative image of their bodies.
Absolutely. And I think that children, like, because they're less formed by the world, they're just younger.
Yeah.
Um, they do have a naturally freer relationship to the body, so nudity is less shocking to them than it is to adults because they haven't yet learned that it should be shocking. And I've actually experienced this. So before I started doing yoga, and in addition to in the transition before yoga was enough to like pay my rent, I was a childcare worker,
Hmm.
and I worked like in family homes, so doing like private nannying. And there's this one family who, you know, they were pretty like open people, and their 2 turned 3-year-old son, like I would give him his bath at night, and he repeatedly asked me to bathe with him. And if it was my own child, no doubt, obviously I
Mhm.
would jump in the bath with my own child. But because it was someone else's child, the first couple times he asked me, I was like, no, that's not what we're doing. I'm just giving you your bath and, whatever. And I just kind of deflected it. But he repeatedly asked. So I did talk to his parents about it. And I was like, I'm not uncomfortable with this, but I don't want to do anything that you would consider inappropriate.
Yeah.
And they were like, and they actually felt the same way. They're like, if you want to do that, like feel free, but I don't want you to feel like you have to just because he's asking.
Yeah.
You can say no to him. And I was like, oh, okay, perfect. So we're all on board. So the next time he like asked, please, please, please bathe with me, I was like, okay. So I got in the bath and he looked at me, just did a like up and down, and he said, your body looks funny. And I was like, yeah, all bodies are different. And he was like, okay, I like your tattoos. And I was like, thank you. And then we just played, and then we, played with the water and stuff. And
Mhm.
it was totally unshocking to him. Whereas if I like jumped in the bath with any of most of the adults in my life, they'd be like, oh, so surprised.
Yeah. Wow. Well, that's a very powerful experience. Personally, I think that the way that things are going online, it's making it more and more difficult for younger, like children or so on, to participate because of this fear of, child abuse, pedophiles and all that kind of stuff.
Hmm.
There was a really sad um, thing that happened. I think it was in England. There was this water park that hosted family naturist gatherings, and people found out that children participated, and they freaked out, and they made sure that this event was canceled, and they made it very difficult for other types of family events to take place. And I feel like this type of attitude is only getting worse.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, I understand online the risk. Like, online is like the largest platform for pedophilia. So I would never recommend that a
Yeah.
child be naked online, even if it is their own free will to do so. Um,
Yeah.
and in fact, I have had people message me. Like a lot of people want to send me their nude pics because it empowers them, and I'm like, yeah, go for it. Like I'm here to like hype you up, But I had one person message me and they're like, hey, I'm 14 years old, can I send you my picture? And I was like, no. Like I support what you're doing. I think that it's totally okay and not shameful at all to be naked, to take pictures and keep them for yourself, but it
Yeah,
would be inappropriate for me to have pictures of a minor.
of course.
So absolutely I will not receive your picture,
That's
you
another
know.
thing that I consider interesting about you, the time that you take to interact with people, um, the conversations that you have, and how some people approach you with a really heavily sexual interest, and how you manage to, communicate with them what it's about, and all that kind of stuff. What, why do you do that?
Um, well, I want people's lives to be better. It's pretty
Okay.
simple, really. Like yoga, yoga has made my life better. And
Mhm.
but that's really just scratching the surface. Like what I want to share with the world comes out of like the overflow of my heart,
Mhm.
right? So I love to meditate. I share meditations as well. I love to read. Like I read a lot of self-help. I read a lot of just also fiction and nonfiction, which it can really help to, fiction really helps to grow empathy.
Mhm.
Nonfiction really helps to grow diversity of knowledge. Um, I read about communication skills. I'm just really passionate about developing myself into the best possible person I can be. Like I kind of envision being in my old age just more radiant than I was at any time previous. Like I think
Mhm.
it's upward
Yeah.
perpetually. It's just perpetually upward. That's the direction that I want to go in, and I want to bring people along with me. That's kind of my goal. Like sometimes I do experience money stress because I'm a human,
Mhm.
and I need to have my needs met. And so sometimes I'm like, oh my god, how can I make more sales? How can I
Yeah.
develop this into like a sustainable, like right now I'm able to pay for my rent and food, but what if I choose to have a family someday? My
Yeah.
income right now is not going to be enough to support more people, and so I get stressed and I want to make sales. But that is just like the moment that happens, as I'm working through the process
Yeah.
of becoming a more peaceful and richer individual who doesn't stress about these worldly issues. Um, and a lot of the growth that has happened in me, all of the growth that has happened in me, has happened because somebody created the space that I was allowed to grow in.
Hmm.
Somebody just listened for a while. Somebody, you know, heard me. Somebody cared for me.
Yeah.
Somebody like secured a safe environment, and said, "Go in there and be by yourself. I'll make sure that nothing bad gets in while you need to be in there," you know. And so I want to give to others what has been given to me. Like if nobody has ever told you that you're beautiful, it would be my honor to be
Mhm.
the person that tells you that you're beautiful. If nobody has ever told you that it's actually not wrong to, be naked, or it's actually not wrong to have sexual feelings, it would be my pleasure to be the first person to break that news to you, you know?
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I remember that in the beginning when I started what I was doing, I really was focused on replying to all the messages, to all the comments, to all the interactions, but it came to a point where it became exhausting and overwhelming. And also I struggled with a pretty bad addiction of, social media, cell phone. Like I remember that we would be eating or going to sleep or waking up or going to the bathroom or taking a shower or like whatever I was doing, I felt like I had to be there for people that needed me to be there. And then it came to a point where YouTube's algorithm is very interesting and all of a sudden it really likes what you're doing and it just exposes you to an enormous amount of people. And that's when I became like overwhelmed, when it became something that I could not do anymore. So I felt guilty about dedicating time to some and not to others. And I also was struggling with not getting things done. So I just decided that I wasn't going to do it anymore. And now all my interactions with people on social media are more like business interactions, more naturist movement projects kind of interactions. And I know that some people don't like that at all, but for now, it's what's been working for me. And I'm always amazed, like when people dedicate the amount of time and effort that you do um, to having these social interactions with other people.
Hmm. Yeah,
So,
I mean, I also have to set boundaries. And the way that I've chosen to set my boundaries is to have a dedicated time, usually just one day each week, not even a whole day, just like
mhm,
one sit each week that I dedicate to each platform, and I
mhm,
respond to all the messages and comments. So it could take, at this point, my following is not huge. Like my biggest platform is Twitter. Um, and it's like has 17,000 followers. So relative to many influencers, it's very, very small. Um, but it doesn't take me that much time to respond to all of my messages if I just do it once a week. But the thing is, most of the people that I respond back to me immediately. So
mhm.
if I felt the need to do that every day, the 2 hours that I put into Twitter once a week would be 2 hours every single day.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
the way that I've decided to establish my boundaries is just I will respond to all of my Twitter messages once a week, all of my Instagram messages once a week, and that's just how I do it on all of my platforms.
And that's another thing that I think is interesting, that you and a lot of people are on a lot of different platforms. I'm looking at allmylinks.com
Mm-hmm.
slash the naked yogi, and you're on Patreon, you're on OnlyFans, you're on Twitter, you're on Vimeo, you're on Instagram, you're on YouTube, you're on TikTok. So does it become overwhelming to have to, because the way I see each platform has like its nuance, it has its the way that it works, the type of content, and so on. Sometimes you could just create one piece of content and share it on all platforms, but sometimes that doesn't work on other platforms.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I basically have two types of content that I make. One is censored and one is uncensored.
Hmm.
So I make like my subscription content, which is uncensored, and the exact same stuff goes up on um, Patreon and on OnlyFans. And
Hmm.
then like still photos or like short GIFs from those content is repurposed for Twitter,
Hmm.
which is also uncensored. And then I make the exact same posts that I make on TikTok. I just repost on Instagram. So I just keep it simple by doing it censored and uncensored. And you know what? It's like hit and miss. Like
Hmm.
my most recent TikTok, which I've only been working on for about a week, has not taken off. I've hardly gotten any views. Um, but the exact same videos that I'm posting get much more love over on Instagram. So, like maybe the TikTok will take off in time. Maybe the kind of content that I'm making just works better on Instagram. And honestly, I'm fine with it. Like this is something that an insecurity that I've I guess suffered from is feeling that the success of my social media accounts is the success of my business. And I'm of course invested in the success of my business because I use it to like pay my bills. um, but I don't get paid from TikTok, I don't get paid from Instagram, I
Yeah.
don't get paid from Twitter. I get paid from Patreon and OnlyFans, and I do market my Patreon and OnlyFans on all those other accounts. But if I lose an Instagram account, I haven't lost my stream of income,
Of course.
so I can just start back up. So it's taken a lot of work, and I mean it continues to take a lot of work. Like some days I feel very attached, and then some days I don't. But it does help to remember that most of the platforms that I'm on don't pay me. So
Yeah.
as long as I still have access to my streams of income, I'm doing fine. And there have so far been no threats to my Patreon or to my OnlyFans. Like both of those platforms are very accepting of what I do and the way that I do it. So um,
Yeah. I
yeah,
think that you have a good advantage of having different platforms, because that's also the disadvantage of the way that I approach it, because I focus on one. And like when I lost my YouTube channel, I had a Twitter, but I didn't really do much with it. So it's in a sense starting from scratch. But I also noticed that the community on Twitter is much more supportive than the community on YouTube. And Twitter tends to be a little bit more open, but they do have like very strict guidelines. Like if there's nudity on the profile picture or on the header, um, you can get banned like immediately. And then it's strange because some accounts have penises, erect penises as a
yeah,
profile picture, and others have like just a subtle nude picture, and then the subtle ones get taken down. But eventually, what I think the approach should be is you should take care of your audience, because the audience are one, the ones that are getting value out of what you're doing, and two, the ones that are supporting you and enabling you to continue to do it. So oh yeah, I wanted to ask you, if is the reason why you have some pieces of content censored and some pieces uncensored financial strategy, or is it more depending on what the platform itself allows you to do?
oh, it totally just depends on what the platform allows.
Yeah.
um, this is something that came up like very early on when I started posting on Twitter. The In order to just like streamline my process,
Yeah.
I had the pictures that I uploaded to Instagram, which had to be censored because of the platform, would just like automatically upload to Twitter, which meant that my Twitter posts were also censored. And a few people messaged me and were like, "Hey, what's the whole deal with having nudity behind a paywall? Like, isn't that kind of the opposite of what you're doing?" And immediately I was like, yeah, you're absolutely right. And so I just like figured out a way to post, a censored version on Instagram and an uncensored version on Twitter, because I don't want nudity to be behind a paywall. What I'm commodifying is not nudity, and it is not my body. What I'm commodifying is my service, which is yoga instruction and meditation instruction. So yeah, I just found a way to make sure that the uncensored platforms receive uncensored
Yeah.
content, And then, but I still want to be on the censored platforms. I want to be on TikTok and Instagram just because they're so huge. So there's a huge potential market there. Plus, I mean, I have fun creating the content. It's enjoyable. So yeah, I just kind of play within the rules because I don't want to get banned.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I remember that when I first started my YouTube channel, I was sharing nudity because I wanted to normalize the body through exposure. And then I was taken down. So I started doing a censored and uncensored version. And the uncensored version was also on Patreon. But it didn't really feel right for me. And plus, it was really difficult, or for me, it was an extra layer of work that I believed was unnecessary to censor some and not others. So I found out how the community guidelines on YouTube worked and how the auto detection service worked. So, and I started working within those parameters. And then I was able to share nudity. Um, but the idea of what I wanted to offer was I don't necessarily feel like I'm a content creator in the sense that that's the content creation is my service, or the business model that I'm building. It's more like I feel like Patreon is a platform that enables me to promote naturism through different expressions, some through creation of content, but others through projects or through, different things that I want to accomplish, working with the Federation or so on. So in a way, I see it more of like people wanting to be a part of the social work and transformation that I'm trying to accomplish. And on the side, I'm giving them content that has to do with what's going on or bringing value. People want to know about erections, so let's talk about erections. People want to know about pubic hair, so let's talk about pubic hair, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you consider that what you're doing is more focused on providing a service of yoga, creating content, or maybe trying to transform people's relationships with their bodies?
I would say that transforming people's relationships with their bodies is the overarching goal. And the method is, well, I guess the method is both things. Like in terms of a service, like as I've mentioned before, like I'm a person with bills that need to get paid, so I need to provide a service that is like marketable, and that is yoga.
Mm-hmm.
But I make stuff. I do a lot that is not for profit. Like I make lots of Vimeo videos that are, a lot of them are just lifestyle videos. I've made cooking videos. I've made videos of me going on bike rides. Just I guess sharing my life. Like, yeah, so I do both, I guess, is the answer. My goal overall is to encourage people to think differently about their bodies. But I do that both through like a marketable service, which is yoga, and through just free content creation. Um,
And
of
people can
course,
find this at vimeo.com/the naked yogi. And I'll share all the links in the description of this video when I upload it to YouTube.
yeah, nice, awesome. Yeah, Vimeo, I've been having a lot of fun with. It's so nice that I can be fully nude in Vimeo videos.
Have you had
Yeah.
problems with their bandwidth? They recently changed their, I'd say, business strategy, and the way that they're handling this, to the way that I see it makes sense because their business model is not off of advertisement, but they're basically really putting the financial burden on the content creators. So now they came up with this strategy that they're not only going to sell their service according to the amount of data that you download. That was how it worked previously. Now they're adding an additional layer of how much bandwidth or how much traffic you generate. Well, bandwidth and traffic are different, but they're sort of related. So I had Vimeo come to me and tell me that if I didn't upgrade, I was going to lose my channel. And I was like, wait, explain to me what's going on, because they were more focused on me upgrading to a tier that is 3 times more expensive, that gives me ability to upload 3 times, or I don't know how many times more data than I actually need. So I was working with them and I'm like, okay, so what's the problem? And they explained to me that basically I was generating too much bandwidth and it was affecting, their business or whatever, and they needed me to either upgrade, or they didn't really want to talk about the other strategy that would be lowering it. So what I did was basically I took all my videos and I made them private and I made them available to Patreon, and they're no longer available to the general public because of this.
Right. Yeah, I ended up just purchasing the larger package. Like, it's a bit of a hit, but I also benefit from the fact that Vimeo has an on-demand feature.
Mm-hmm.
So the same videos that I release for subscribers as a part of the subscription package, I also release on demand on Vimeo. So people that don't want to purchase a monthly repeating subscription package can just
Yeah.
buy one video here and there. Which means that I have income coming in through Vimeo, which
Yeah.
makes it like more accessible for me to buy a larger package. If I was just creating free content, that might have like sunk my Vimeo account.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just thought that the way that they handled it was very mob like. Like when the mafia arrived to your store and said that they wanted to sell security, and you're like, well, I don't need security. So they would destroy your business and say, oh, it looks like you now need security, so I'm going to
Yeah.
sell security. I guess that's what I didn't like, and that's what I didn't want to give into. Um,
Hmm.
and plus, I'm focusing more and more of my creation process through Twitter, and my traffic source is Twitter. So I don't know, I just didn't want to take part in it. I didn't like the way they were handling it.
Yeah. Yeah. Understandably. Yeah. I got to a point where I was just kind of like fed up with fighting these systems that don't care about me.
Oh yeah.
Like I, especially with my first Instagram account, I was thinking that I could like fight censorship. And I do have a bit of that fighter spirit within me. It would be awesome to like organize some sort of like naked rally or whatever. Like I
I'm working on
have
that.
awesome, awesome. I'm so glad. Um, but the one of the things that I realized about social media is like in in a government, rallying has a certain effect, like hopefully in a democratic government,
Mhm.
because the people involved in the rally are voters, right?
Yeah.
And so their say matters. But on a social media account, you can just be taken down. You know, if we compare a social media platform to a government, they might care about the voters, the people that have accounts, but they don't care about the people that don't have accounts. And
Yeah.
if they don't want you to have an account, you don't have an account. So what I realized is like, I was fighting Instagram as if it was a democratic government that cared about my voice,
Oh yeah.
but it's not.
And it doesn't.
So, and it doesn't. So if the question just came down to, do I want to be on Instagram or do I not? Do I want to be on TikTok or do I not? Do I want to be on Vimeo or do I not? Right.
Mhm.
Um, and so it doesn't make sense for me to fight a system that doesn't care about me.
Yes.
So if I want to be on these platforms, and to me, like the cost is worth the benefit,
Mhm.
or the benefit is worth the cost, I mean. So I just persevere.
What you say makes perfect sense, but I have a very big fuck you element that
Hmm.
I need to feel like, despite these platforms don't care, I need to feel like I'm not. I don't know that I can put up a fight, despite the fact that I can't, and despite the fact that it might make the progress or the growth of what I'm doing a little bit more difficult. But the way I see social media, it's one of the tools that I have in order to accomplish my goal, but it's not the only tool. It might be the most important one, but I feel like there's other ways. And at the end of the day, the platforms are going to change when society changes. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of things that we can do, like content, but also like institutions, like events, like rallies, like different things that we can do to normalize the body. And through that, with enough time, I feel that society will change, because the way that I see society is that it's becoming more and more open to free choice. Like, we've already accepted that people can choose their sexuality in the sense that they don't have to be heterosexual. We are now passing through the phase that people can choose what type of relationship they have, if they want to get married, if they want to have children, if they want to be monogamous, if they. So I feel like the being able to be nude is only an additional layer of being able to choose. So my hope is that some point in the future, hopefully I'm alive by then, people can choose whether to dress or not.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, like, I understand that there are circumstances for everything, right? Like, for example, in the story that I told earlier, I didn't jump into the bath with this 3-year-old the first time that he asked me, because I
Mhm.
understood that his parents, their comfort mattered,
Of
you
course.
know. So there are circumstances where, like, there are lots of factors, and there might be circumstances where um, dress tends to be appropriate, you know. And there, but it would be nice to see, like, a broader scope of times where it's not necessary.
Of course. Yeah. And that's what I mean, if I had to materialize when I feel like we've accomplished at least the goal that I think would be worth accomplishing, is the day that I'm cooking naked in my house and I forgot a certain ingredient. And instead of, because the way, well, different cities work different ways, but the way that Mexico is, all the houses are together. And within half a block from here, I can just walk to the store. I would love to just run to the store, grab whatever I need, come back and continue cooking. And it doesn't have to be like I have to get dressed, go to the store, come back, get naked, continue what I was doing, that sort of
Hmm.
thing. Um,
Yeah. A big one that gets me is, like, outdoor public spaces. Like, oh my gosh, I've loved being in the sun nude from the time that I was quite young. And my grandfather had a cottage. So when my family was visiting, I would, like, take the rowboat
mhm,
out to this, like, floating dock in the middle of the bay, so that I
mhm.
could sunbathe nude far away enough from people that it wouldn't be able to upset them.
Yeah,
I would love if I could just do that on the yard, you know,
yeah,
that I didn't have to, like, take these measures. And, like, when I go hiking, my friends and I will often skinny dip, but we're, like, looking around. Is there anybody nearby? Like, do we have to be careful? I wish that we didn't have to do that, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, well, I've become more cynical when it comes to that. We like to go to different beaches and try to find new potential new destinations. And I've noticed that there's always like the main beach or like the public beach, and then there's a lot of little beaches nearby. And if you go to one of those little beaches, it tends to be a little bit more difficult to get there. So you're putting in more time and more effort. And when you get there, sometimes no one is around, sometimes they are. Before, if there was someone around, then it's like, we did that 45-minute hike for nothing.
Yeah.
And now it's like, fuck it. It's like,
Yeah.
if if we are putting so much time and effort to go to a place that is separated from the rest of the population, and these people that are here have done the same, then they might expect or might even embrace seeing something different. And I think that seeing people skinny dip isn't that big of a deal.
Yeah. Some
And
people
what
can be quite
has
offended, though.
surprised I'm sorry, what
Sorry.
has surprised me the most is the positive reaction that people have had. Like, they might be surprised at first, but they're very comprehensive and like very respectful. They don't try to tell you what you're doing is wrong. They're just like, oh, cool.
Yeah, and the thing is, I think that a lot of people are non-confrontational. Some people
Yes.
that are confrontational can be very confrontational, and that's a problem. But more people just keep their discomfort to themselves, which, I mean, I think is fine. Like, it's not like I want to go around causing discomfort in others, but I have a strong sense of what I'm responsible for in the world and what I'm not, and I understand that I'm not responsible for other people's feelings. I am responsible for my own actions. So I'm responsible for doing things that are non-harmful.
Yeah.
I'm responsible for being kind and polite and generous, but I'm not responsible for your feelings about me, you know. And so, a circumstance that kind of, like, displays this is I went to a beach here in Canada, and I researched in advance to make sure that I was like grounded in my truth, grounded in the truth, making sure that female nipples are not considered public indecency.
Hmm.
Verified, I'm ready to go to the beach. I'm going to like wear my underwear, but I won't wear my shirt. And so that's what I did. I went to the beach, took off my shirt, ran into the ocean, felt great. Like I was lounging. I like snapped a picture for the gram or whatever. Um, and most people were really positive. Like, you know, most of the people around me were like, nice, like power to you, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But then a lifeguard came over and was like, I'm going to have to ask you to cover up. And I was like, why? And they were like, well, somebody down the beach just complained about it. And I
Hmm.
was like, well, you know, the thing is, I'm within my rights. I like looked up, I'm, you know, within my rights. So I actually don't have to cover up. And the lifeguard was just like, oh, well, I, I didn't realize. Okay, carry on, you know? Um, but in that moment, like the person that cared was not brave enough to talk to me,
Yeah.
you know? So if we're in a situation where there's not a lifeguard, like it's suppose it's not like one of the major public beaches, the likelihood is if somebody down the beach is upset, they're probably not going to talk to me about it.
No.
So I can just go on my merry way, and they can, you know, take a moment to look inward and deal with it or not. And it's truthfully not my business.
Yeah, and it's also an invitation, as you mentioned, so people can meditate on why they feel uncomfortable of your, in this case, your breasts. Why do your breasts make them feel so upset? But it's true, like people, and especially in those cases, like I know people are not going to take a 45-minute hike back just to get the police or whoever to come to talk to me. And even if they talk to me, um, specifically in Mexico, from where the ocean starts to 10 meters within to the land. So it's like from where the water is to the land, those 10 meters is federal property. And there's nothing under federal property that considers acts of indecency. There's no such thing. It doesn't exist. It only exists in a municipal level or a state level. But since it's federal property, they don't apply. So if a police officer was ever to talk to me, I would just tell him, so it's like, under what federal law am I unable to be naked here? And there is
Right.
no federal law. So he would be like, but maybe Mexico is not the best example to try to tell authority that they're wrong.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But nonetheless, if they're willing to have a conversation, it's like you can tell them that what I'm doing isn't really wrong. People might not like it, but that's different.
Yeah. 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 And well, it's not illegal. Like it's not wrong. Even if it is illegal, it's not wrong. In my opinion, like wrong is like this like moral word. Like what is right and what is wrong, what is good and what is evil. Like nudity doesn't fall there. Nudity is totally amoral. It's not about morals at all. You know, nudity is just your body,
Yeah.
you know.
It's just
And so
how
if
can being you be immoral?
like it's possible that some people have belief systems that do um put these like moral codes around the body,
Yeah.
but most people don't. And even within these systems where that this kind of like moral relationship to the body is implied, it's often not stated directly. Like this is actually a conversation that I recently had with one of my subscribers. Um, I had talked about being raised in a Christian environment that did teach me body shame, and they said, well, I'm actually like part of the Catholic Church, and I still am part of the Catholic Church, and I don't feel like Catholicism disempowers my nudity at all. And
Yeah.
in fact, um, this pope, whatever pope, um, wrote about how nudity is not inherently sexual or moral. It's not a sexual or moral issue.
Yeah.
And that's part of what inspired me in nudism as a teenager within the Catholic Church. They felt inspired by what the Pope had said.
Uh-huh.
And so that was a really beautiful thing to learn about this person and to learn about Christianity, is that I had often been taught my body shame in a Christian context, but it's not a part of the Christian message. It was just a part of the culture that I was in,
Yeah,
you
because
know?
there's nothing specific in the Bible that talks against nudity. There are examples where nudity is mixed with other things, and people tend to believe that it's the nude aspect that was wrong when, like Adam and Eve, when they discovered that they were naked. It has nothing to do with nudity itself. It has to do with the disobedience to God. Whether you consider that to be good or bad is irrelevant. The idea here is that nudity itself is not inherently wrong. And
Yeah, yeah.
I think one thing that really made me question my system of beliefs was I was probably about 10 or 11 years old. I don't remember exactly how old. I was playing a video game in one of my friend's house. We were in his room. And I remember that one of his sisters crossed the room and went into the bathroom, and she was topless. But she acted so natural, and I later figured out that she didn't know I was there because when she came out of the bathroom, she saw me and then she freaked out.
Right.
But the time that she was in the bathroom, I was thinking to myself, wow, she looked so natural. Like I because I felt like adrenaline and I felt insecure. I didn't know what was going on because I had never seen a woman walk topless so naturally. But in that time, I was like, well, there's nothing wrong with it. It's fine. But when she came out and freaked out, I was like, okay, then maybe there was something wrong with me being a stranger. But within her context of being in her home with her little brother, there's nothing wrong with that. And that experience made me question a little bit about the way that I perceive nudity. I didn't really think much of it after that, but then when I discovered naturism, I remembered that experience and I was like, wow. So it's like not everyone views the body the same way. Not every family educates their children to interact with their bodies or with other people's bodies the same way.
Hmm.
So that was powerful. Would you consider yourself to be a naturist? Have you decided to attribute any type of labels? I know that a lot of people don't like the idea of labels.
Yeah, I mean, I'm fine with it. Like I honestly don't care that much. In general, in my life, I prefer to leave like open-ended descriptions of myself that are not like limited by labels. Um, yeah. So, and it comes up in a variety of ways, which I've talked about on other platforms. Like, I have spent long stretches of time eating primarily vegan, but I don't like to call myself a vegan because it's like it's a box, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so in general, and same thing with like a variety of things. Like people ask me about my sexual orientation sometimes, and that is I'm very open to speak about sexuality and about my sexuality, but to
Mhm.
say I am a this is like, oh, but what about the fluidity of being? you know,
Uh-huh.
what about the flow state? Um, so like the way that I relate to myself, like inside my own head, inside my own spirit, I don't call myself names such as naturist.
Mhm.
But in the world, that's how I operate. So I
Yeah.
totally respect that as a label that fits me. So
Yeah. I think labels have a bad reputation because some people use them to define and others use it to limit. Um, whenever you're interacting with someone, it's important to have concepts where the other person could have a level of comprehension to who you are or what are your parameters or your limits or your affinities or whatever. But other people use it as, oh, you're not meeting the criteria that is very clear right here, so you can't be a naturist or you can't be a nudist or you can't be a
yeah,
vegan or you can't be a
yeah, exactly. And that's one of the things. Like I don't want to fall short of the requirements of a group that I never promised that I was a part of, you
Mhm.
know? And this is one of the things, like, I often hear nudism prefaced with non-sexual nudism, or as you said, non-erotic.
Hmm.
Um, but for me, like, sexuality is totally on the table. I don't create sexual content because I choose not to.
Yeah.
But for me, like, it doesn't bother me at all if you want to bring your sexuality to the table, if you want to talk about that, if your experiences of being nude are and have been and continue to be sexual, like,
Hmm.
let's talk about all of that. you know so it is possible that some nudists might think that my very open relationship to sexuality and very sex positive attitude kind of takes me out of that kind of nudist niche of being non-sexual. But that's, if anybody has a problem with me, I don't have a problem with myself. So
Yeah. Doesn't matter. So, what would you? I often listen to this idea of making naturism more sex positive. First of all, I don't really understand what sex positivity is. I mean, I feel like a lot of people have like certain understandings of what it is, but I'm not sure if there's like a consensus, or like how would you define sex positivity? What is sex positivity?
for myself, it's really just about having, well, on a very basic level, a positive relationship
Hmm.
about sexuality. So um, it doesn't mean like I'm an advocate for sex. I'm an
Hmm.
advocate for you. Who are you? What do you want? What is your relationship to your sexuality? And whatever you answer, it's okay. That's just kind of my perspective. um, I stick boundaries around harm. So it's not okay to harm yourself or others, um, with an understanding that there are lots of kinks that are, consensually,
Hmm.
like, harmful within a limit. So it's like
Yeah,
appropriate. Um, but yeah, it's just, for me, like, sex positive just means like not shaming. It's just anything positive, being enthusiastic, being accepting, being, gracious.
but does that mean being open? Like, for example, if you're, I don't know, if you're doing yoga at the beach and then a guy decides to come and masturbate, is that acceptable?
That's a good question. I I mean, if somebody is like masturbating privately, I don't I don't think it's a problem for me.
It
If
doesn't.
somebody is like masturbating at me, I'd be like, you're invading my personal space, and so you're making your sexuality my problem,
Yeah,
you know. And so like, that's just a boundaries issue. But I'm not against masturbation.
of
I'm not
course.
even against public masturbation. Well, I mean, obviously, again, contextual. It's
Depends. Yes.
yeah,
It
it's like when I say public masturbation, it could be like
doesn't
in
mean going outside of school and masturbating, right?
yeah, it's like within the context that it's appropriate. So say there's like an organized orgy in a field or something like that. That's a public space, whatever. Like, it's a group setting where it's totally acceptable, because it's context driven.
And because
Um,
everyone that's going there knows what they're getting into, and they have accepted it. Um,
yeah. And also, like, I mean, if imagine you're in a forest and you're totally alone, there's no one around you but the trees. I don't think there's anything wrong with masturbating there either. Like,
I don't
do
imagine
as
doing it because I'm not sure if I'd be turned on by the trees, but
but somebody might be, and that's to
yeah.
them. And this is like, um my kind of, the way that I approach sex positivity is just saying, like, you're all right to whatever people bring to the table. So, like, somebody is turned on by nature. Yeah, your sexuality is fine. Somebody is gay. Your sexuality rocks. Somebody is asexual. Nice. It's just like, as long as you are not harming people that are not consenting.
Yeah. And the thing is consent specifically, because, for example, some, I think some types of sexual kinks or desires are wrong because they're harmful, because they're imposing their sexual desire on others. That could be people or living beings like animals, for example,
Right.
because they don't have the ability to consent. to what's going on. So, for example, in this perspective of a guy masturbating in the beach while you're doing yoga or skinny dipping, or masturbating to me doing yoga or skinny dipping, I think it's harmful because it's not consensual, because
Hmm.
there was never an acknowledgement or an agreement, or it's like the person never walked up to me and said, do you mind if I masturbate a couple meters from here? If that was the case, I mean, I would probably say I would not like you to masturbate here. But but if
Yeah,
that
but
was
that
the
consent
case,
is important.
yeah, if that was the case, then the person, if the person is doing it, then there's nothing wrong because I gave them that consent.
Yeah, yeah.
Does
And
that
this is
make
actually something, yeah, it makes sense to me a lot. And this is something that I message with subscribers about. Like some people will say, hey, I sometimes masturbate to your yoga videos. Is that a problem? Does that offend you? And my answer in that context is no. I mean, you're in your own home. I'm in my own home. I have no idea what you're doing or when. I'm like, but after my yoga video is recorded, it's just up there. Like
Yeah,
you're masturbating at home is not harming me. I hope that you have a very enriching sexual experience with yourself. Have at it. But if somebody were to come to my yoga class and be like, hey, do you mind if I just masturbate in the back of the class? I'd be like, no, that's not appropriate now. You
yeah,
know?
yeah. I would say, like, I don't have a problem with you masturbating, but why do you have to share it with me? It's like maybe the sharing that information with me might not be something I consent to because I don't care, but you do in the privacy of your home whatever you want.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I don't mind when people send me those messages because a lot of them are looking for consent. They're like, oh, I felt guilty when I did this. And so I want to know whether or not it's okay, like whether or not you consent. In which case I say, yeah, I do consent. Masturbate without guilt. You're fine.
I think
You know?
that it makes sense, but it's also funny. It's like if you see someone and you consider them to be attractive and you have an erotic thought, does that require consent? I would say it doesn't if it doesn't impose anything on the person. But if you're staring at the person and making them feel uncomfortable, then yeah, that's inappropriate. But if you see someone, you're like, wow, super attractive person, and then the person probably never finds out, then I don't think it matters. I don't know. It might
Yeah.
be, eh.
Yeah, I mean, I take a similar approach to just people sending me their nudes as I take a similar approach with people sending me information about masturbation.
Yeah.
I'm like, good for you, like whatever makes you feel good, that kind of thing, which usually is like creates or opens a really positive dialogue because some people will like find my Twitter, send me a DM me a video of them masturbating, and then I'll like reply something like, I hope you feel good, have a great day, you know? And then they'll be like, nobody has ever responded that way when I've DM'd them a video like this. And I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, I think that you're fine and I think that masturbating is healthy, so like don't worry about it. And
Mhm.
that leads to like an interesting conversation. But I did actually just this past week have a kind of different interaction on Twitter, which kind of just makes me laugh because this guy sent me a video of him masturbating and asked, like, does this turn you on or whatever? And I just like deflected that question and just said something positive to him, like, hope you're happy or hope you had an empowering experience or whatever. Yeah, I must have used the word empowering because he messaged back, I don't want to be empowered. I want you to like it. And then I was like, okay, see, this is where you've asked something of me rather, like then you're entering my personal space,
Mhm.
right? When you ask me to engage. Like you having your own personal sexual experience is totally fine. And I can give you the thumbs up and tell you that you're totally fine. But when you want me to engage, you're asking me to come into something. And that's where it's potentially crossing the lines of like just being too much. Right.
Mhm.
Because I'm here to empower people, but I'm not here to, as I said, be a sex worker. So if people feel empowered sending me their masturbation videos, I'm like, that's fine. I want you to feel good about yourself. I don't want you to have a shameful relationship to your sexuality.
Mhm.
but don't make your sexuality my business. Like if you want me to be a part of it, that's a no.
And how did they react?
That was in my last like set aside time of Twitter responding, so I
Okay.
haven't seen that yet.
The story continues.
The story continues.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I think that what people do that have this really sex positive attitude, I think it's great. Um, it's just the way that I think the way that I handle the all the sexual topics when it comes to what I'm doing in naturism versus when it comes to my personal life and relationship and things like that. I see them as two separate entities. And the reason why I decided to separate this is not necessarily from a sex negative perspective, but it's more like a strategy that I want to make naturism as accessible to people as possible. And the way that I conceive this, as I said it before, is that as soon as you put sex into the mix, you immediately segregate. And I don't like that. And I also don't like the public display of my sexuality per se. Like
Mm-hmm.
I'm not an exhibitionist, and this is something that at the time was like ironic because some people would associate promoting nudity online as a little bit of exhibitionist behavior.
Right.
But I've noticed during this time that I don't get aroused at all. I don't get turned on by it. So
Mm-hmm.
it's a mixture of strategy and also a mixture of not feeling turned on by it. So it's like I've decided to make it different. And I think that conceptually, the word or the movement naturist or naturism should be asexual in nature in the sense that it's welcoming to all. But I do feel like there's a ton of other expressions when it comes to nudity that could contemplate different levels of sexuality in them.
Yeah, yeah. It seems to me like whether or not sexuality can fit within what you're doing depends on what your goal is, right?
Yeah.
And so, in the goal that you've set to make nudity acceptable and accessible,
Hmm.
sexuality will splinter that goal, will make it difficult.
Yeah.
My goal is to connect people to themselves,
Empower,
right?
right?
And yeah, to empower individuals. And so connecting to your sexuality and feeling empowered in your sexuality
Hmm.
is just as much a part of developing the wholeness of yourself
Yeah.
as connecting to your body, as connecting to your spirit. So that's part of the reason why sexuality fits within what I do, but it might not fit within what you do, even though we
Yeah.
both are operating within the same niche.
Yeah, and to a certain extent, nudity is a tool of what we want to accomplish. I noticed that social nudity had so many benefits on me personally that I felt that it was great to share that with the world, and maybe other people will have radically different benefits than I do, but it's more like the goal that I've set to myself is being like a door where people can come in and enter, and then once they discover that this exists, then they could discover all the ramifications. So I don't think that only family nudity, social nudity is the correct thing or the right way to go, or only couples or only whatever. I
Mm-hmm.
understand that there's a wide variety, but I do feel that within this context or the scope that I'm handling or I'm moving in, and also the way that the naturist community itself as a movement operates is more of a asexual approach. Um,
Mm-hmm.
because nudity separated from eroticism is also very relaxing and empowering, and because there's a lot of tension when it comes to sexuality.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's a lot more,
Inherently, I
it's
mean, like,
complex.
yeah, yeah. And like a good, healthy, positive, enriching sexuality is about mounting and releasing tension. That's exactly what it's about, you know? So if we want to create a space that is like always relaxed all the time, it's not
Yeah.
going to be a sexual space.
Yeah, well, the orgasm by definition is the liberation of that tension, right? The accumulated
Exactly,
tension,
exactly.
letting it go.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, and I also feel like there's not enough conversation going on in the naturist community. Sometimes, as all communities, we become echo chambers where we just reinforce our views, and sometimes we don't have a conversation with someone who might have a different approach. And I don't think, I mean, that's not good or bad. It's just the way that social media works and the way that social media segregates depending on topics and interest.
Mhm.
But it can have really bad negative effects in society. And sometimes there's a conflict, like a perception of conflict. Maybe you post something and I say, oh, I don't agree because of this. And it's nothing bad or confrontational or aggressive, but then someone else reads it and it's like, oh, but she would, whatever. So
Right.
before you know, it just goes completely out of control. And there was an attempt to create a dialogue.
Yeah, and I mean, when you have a like public persona, public following, people do become attached to that image and want to defend it. Like I have
Yeah.
been in situations where, somebody has tweeted something negative at me, and my response is like loving and open, like, I hope that your relationship with your body becomes more and more empowering so that you don't feel the need to lash out at other people who have a liberated experience of their own bodies, something loving. And then then somebody else will follow up and be like, yeah, shut up, shithead. And it's like, that is not the environment that I was trying to create for this dissenter. I was
Yeah.
trying to like allow them to feel the love and acceptance here, you know. But I mean, social media is hard. Like how,
Yeah.
you know,
How do you
it's
control it?
complex.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I agree with that. And there's also an interesting effect that there's an expectation that your persona creates an expectation of who you are, and people expect you to always be that. Or yeah, I don't know, just sometimes, like for example, the separation that I think I do when it comes to the content and things that I make with sexuality, some people could probably perceive me as very conservative and sex negative and you know whatever, but it's not necessarily the case because they don't understand the context, and the
Mm-hmm.
lack of context creates a limited perception of who the person is. And sometimes you feel like you have to meet a specific standard that you've kind of like set, or that people have perceived over time. It's like, what if I decide to do something different? Like, what if I decide to interview a sex worker? Does that mean that, you know, I'm going to the dark side? Or
Right. Yeah,
and
yeah, totally. Like, I mean, everybody that's online is also just a person at,
yeah,
in their heart, and people change. People grow and adapt and adjust. And yeah, and so I mean, I hope in the way that I interact with my following online, that we're able to like break past a little bit of that superficiality. And I do that as much as I can. Like, in my most recent Vimeo video, for example, I just talked about some of the more fragile parts of my personality, because like the goal, and this is so much the goal with what I've been doing from the outset, is vulnerability leads to authenticity. And what I want for people, what I want for myself, is to become more authentic, more radiant all the time,
mhm,
right? And social media is set up for persona, right?
yeah,
That's exactly, you're creating an image. And so, I'm in this kind of like awkward, like limbo space of creating a persona about vulnerability, So, how do I be as genuinely vulnerable as possible while still just creating content? At the end of the day, what I'm doing is the same thing as everybody else. I'm making videos and
mhm,
posts,
yeah.
you know? So, yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting issue, like learning how to just be a person that operates online when online can never encompass the entirety of a person.
I think this is really interesting to talk about, especially because the general public who uses social media as an extension of their everyday life don't understand the difference between having a persona online, like a brand that you have to take care and that you want to build versus just being yourself, just, whoever you are, sharing whatever things you like and so on. There's definitely a curation process in what you share online because you want to convey a message, you want to convey an image, you want to, and I don't know. I mean, I understand where you're coming from because wanting to be genuine means getting out of this persona, but having a business oriented towards an image online means you have to have a persona. So it's like,
Yeah, and how do when I have this goal of being as vulnerable and as authentic as possible, like how do I do that realistically? Because when I'm having a bad day, when I'm crying and you know fragile, I'm not filming myself.
no.
I'm sitting with myself. I'm taking naps. I'm meditating or healing or like asking for cuddles from my close friends. I'm doing what I need to do to get through that moment,
Mhm.
and then I talk about it after, you
Yeah.
know? So I want to be as authentic as I can online and talk about those moments, talk about the times where I feel like, very on edge, where I feel angry, where I feel irritable, where I feel fearful, whatever. I want to talk about those, but I'm not actually filming myself when I'm in the midst of them.
Yeah. Yeah. Because if you did, then you would be acting, then you would be maybe like exaggerating or maybe like more focused on technical side, like how's the framing? Is the audio good? And then
Yeah,
that,
it'd be alienating. It would
yeah.
be like a little bit like what's that word, it'd be like dissociating a little bit, because then I wouldn't be, when you're actively processing an intense emotion, you can only do that in embodiment. You need to be in your body,
Yeah.
you know but if I'm like holding out my selfie stick, I'm not feeling myself in my body. I'm seeing myself outside as an object of perception, but
Yeah.
I need to be the subject
Yeah.
of experience in that moment. So it's just impossible. And like filming yourself is like inherently alienating. You are observing yourself as an object. So like I'm trying to make this object as like, you know, shaped as closely to my actual form as possible, but it's still an object.
Yeah. And that reminds me of like when I document the events and things like that, I try to document it as genuine as possible. Like I don't want people to recreate that they're having fun. I want to
Mm-hmm.
capture them in a moment where they're having fun, but I don't want me capturing in that moment to distract them from the fun that they're having.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It,
Yeah.
it's like I think it's like quantum physics. The thing about quantum physics is that when you measure a quantum, the act of measuring it modifies it. It changes its state. So it's no longer what the measurement comes out to be. And in a way, I feel like this is similar. It's like the wanting to convey a genuine, vulnerable state kind of modifies that the genuine and vulnerability behind the state.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. So I mean, all that I can do, and this is what I've been doing, and people have been responding really positively to it. So I think it is having a good effect. All I can do is like invite people into my debrief. Maybe I can't invite them into the moment that I'm like at like peak emotional intensity, but I
Yeah.
can invite them into the way that I process it. I can sit down in my like sacred corner and say, I had a rough day and this is what happened and this is how I'm dealing with it, and show them what my process looks like, even if I can't bring them into the moment itself. But so far, it seems like that has been enough. Like people have said, "Oh yeah, your process is really interesting. I find it really inspiring the way that you think about yourself and talk about yourself and work through your crap." So it is having a positive effect, even if there are limits to the medium.
How long have you been doing this? Like promoting naked yoga online?
Just over a year. We're right now discussing in January 2021, and I launched my first Instagram account in late November 2019. So just over a year.
So you haven't had many experiences outside of the pandemic.
No, almost none. In fact, I launched like my subscription stuff all was in the middle of the pandemic. So it means I haven't had the opportunity to teach live group classes yet,
Hmm.
which I really hope to do. Travel is like something that I have always envisioned for my life,
Yeah.
and seeing as I like just recently graduated university, I was just on the cusp of that like becoming a possibility. And then the pandemic happened, but now luckily since I've like built this business over the course of the pandemic, it can work really well with travel,
Yeah.
because I could potentially like road trip between naturist resorts and then teach while I'm there and that kind of thing.
Yeah,
So
I
I'm
actually
hope
wanted to ask you
yeah.
if you plan on taking part more actively in the naturist community events, destinations, clubs, resorts.
I absolutely do. Like I've actually become more connected here in my own city, um, which is not a huge city. The community is not huge, but when at points where the lockdown restrictions were eased up,
Mhm.
there have been a couple like there was like one specific naked yoga teacher actually who started hosting classes in her house,
Mhm.
and she has been her and her partner have been a part of the local naturist community here for a while, and they were the first time that I connected with people for social nudity through through a naturist or nudist context rather than it just being the organic overflow of my relationship. And it
Yeah.
was so positive. Like immediately I felt really I felt like I was just in a place where I belonged.
Mhm.
I felt accepted, I felt seen. We were just like immediately on the same wavelength about certain topics.
Yeah.
And so that really encouraged me to become a part of the broader community.
I'm very happy that you have had such a positive experience with the community because I feel like the online naturist community doesn't represent the actual naturist community, like in person. I think most of the conflicts or confrontations or disagreements or whatever that I've had have always been virtual. Like the moment that we're hanging out by the pool with a beer or hiking or skinny dipping or whatever, the interaction is completely different. And people are very nice, very welcoming, very comprehensive, very, I like, I don't know. It's just the way that I perceive the naturist community online. And I think it's not necessarily the naturist community. It's more like the way that social media works modifies a perception completely different than how the community is in person in reality. Like this is one of the greatest communities. Or I don't know. I mean, I think everyone talks great about their community, but
Yeah.
just the level of engagement, the level of support, the level of comprehension, like it's just it's astonishing.
Yeah. I mean, it's awesome, I think, in part because it is counterculture, right? And so when you're part of like any counterculture, the other people within that group understand what you're up against, you know? So there's a certain level of understanding. Like we all took a journey to get here,
Hmm.
So welcome. Like you made it. Right? There's kind of like that attitude. Like you made it against all odds. You're here and you love your body. It's shocking and it's wonderful. It's a miracle.
Yeah, you'll notice that the most common question in an naturist, like the moment that you meet someone in a club or anywhere, is like, "How did you get into this?" Like, it's so I don't know. It's just like the perfect conversation starter, and I think that the ease of interaction in a naturist gathering is nothing like I've seen before. Like I've interacted with other interest groups, other communities, other things, and the level of welcoming, like you are a part of us, like come in, the dinner's ready or the table is served, kind of attitude it's wonderful. It's great.
Yeah, yeah, it's really lovely. I've spoken to a few people online who say, I've I've been naked more at home lately and it feels really good, but I'm just like so nervous about going to my local nude beach. And I'm like, honestly, I think that it will not be nearly as hard as you expect.
No,
Like like becoming comfortable with yourself at home was much harder for
that's
you than the next step. Like you've already done the hardest part.
and people are so afraid because at least the example experience that we've had in our community, when someone wants to practice social nudity, it's really hard to get someone else on board, especially if it's the first time and like all these insecurities. So if you invite someone else, they have their insecurities that you can't really reply to because you never experienced it. So most of the people go by themselves for the first time. And most people are very afraid of not being able to fit in or to interact or to, like, they think that everyone's going to have a great time and they're going to be alone in the table in the back.
Right.
And that's never the case. Like,
Yeah.
the moment that someone walks in, like, everyone starts welcoming you. It's like, how are you doing? Who are you? Where do you come from? And the other thing that I like about nudity is that you don't have anything to set your judgment on. Like, you normally judge people based on how they dress, if they're
Hmm.
compatible with you, or if you have interests in common or whatever. But when someone is naked, it's like you have to get to know them to know if there's interest, like a common interest or not.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, tattoos are one thing for sure. Yeah.
Oh yeah,
But
piercings and
yeah. So
dreadlocks.
those are ways that we definitely express even without our clothing for sure. And very intimate ways that we express actually. Like I have some tattoos that um express like very intimate parts of me, like moments in my life that were very like radical and opening. And I've like commemorated those moments in my body, and they're usually hidden under my pants or shirt, you know? So though clothes are not the way that we demonstrate, you know, our cultural affiliations, um, it in the case of somebody who has no tattoos or whatever, it leaves like this totally open blank slate to be just related to from person to person without class, without style, without subculture as a part of it. And for those of us who do have tattoos, it gives the opportunity to show the stories that we've been creating. Like I've spent from my 18th birthday, as soon as I was legally allowed to get a tattoo, I've been creating my story on my body.
Mhm.
And what an opportunity to share that with people. How awesome, you know?
Yeah, it's a great conversation starter. Like how, and but it also has to do with the barriers that people have or the limits that people have established. Sometimes some tattoos or some scars or some, are very private and people don't want to go too deep into it. But other times it's like an opportunity to share a little bit
Mm-hmm.
about yourself.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So that, I think that would be an interesting experience, if we someday have a follow-up conversation. That I would love to hear what your impressions were before you got more involved in the community, like in person, versus how it turned out to be. But it does seem like you already have a pretty clear idea of how it can be, and I'm sure you're going to have a great time.
Yeah, I expect to.
So I wanted to ask a little bit about, how what would be the relationship between nudity and empowerment? And also, maybe it's another question, but how does this benefit? Well, maybe let's go to another question. I feel like you don't necessarily push the women agenda, which is interesting. Um, do you participate in like feminism or these type of movements that are empowering women and, building a more equal environment and a less objectified and all that? Like, what is your perception on the feminist movement?
um, I'm for it. I definitely am very interested in feminism. I mean, I've read a fair bit of like feminist philosophy, and I share it with my friends who are also readers. And I'm immensely grateful for all the feminists that have come before me, the women who bared their breasts when it was illegal in
Yeah.
order to face the law. You know, what powerhouses. These people are, you know, icons. So now I get to, you know, bare my breasts legally, and I might still have to stand up for the right to do that, or I might have to, like, you know, go up against cultural norms. but it's feminists that allowed me to get where I am. So I'm very for feminism. I'm very for women. But I guess the reason that I don't focus on female specific empowerment
Hmm.
is well, I'm just keeping the door open, to be honest. I'm keeping it open, and it just so happens, which is honestly what I expected, that men are engaging with my content more, you know? Um, and the effects of sexism, um, or sexism is a double-edged sword, right? So women were like under like a sexist scope or
Hmm.
like a lens, women are sexual objects,
Yeah.
but men are inherently sexual animals, you know? And so something that I see all the time is men who don't know how to feel masculine without, like you said, without their dick being involved,
Hmm.
you know? But that's you can just be yourself, you know. So I don't know, I'm not that interested in dividing who my message is for and who it's not. That's really what it comes down to. I'm not interested in saying my message is for women. If men enjoy it, good for them, but it's for women. Like I'm just not interested in separating my message as being for somebody and not for somebody else. It's for everybody.
Hmm.
Everybody can feel empowered in their body. Everybody can feel empowered in their mind. Everybody can feel empowered in their sexuality. Men are engaging more with my content because of, the cultural situation that we're in, that kind of like teaches men to pursue these images of women. Um, so I'm just happen to be engaging more with men um, because of that. But
They're probably the audience that needs more healing when it comes specifically to the type of content that you're creating, because you're a female, maybe they engage with that because you're nude, and then they associate that with something erotic or sexual. But then they have the opportunity of interacting with you and your content, and they might have an opportunity to rethink the way that they're handling this, or the relationship that they have with women, and the perception of this object that provides me sexual gratification versus a human beings with feelings, and you know
yeah, and largely spirituality and self-help has been feminized in our culture. So when women pursue self-help, when they read self-help books, when they go to therapy, when they engage spiritually with their sisters, it's like, okay, nothing wrong with that. That's part of the feminine world. um, and because I'm like offering this opportunity to look at self-help as like a beautiful experience for everyone,
hmm
um, I think that on average, obviously it's not universal, but on average, men have more stigmas about that, more stigmas about therapy, more stigmas about self-help, more stigmas about being spiritual, about, this kind of stuff. So in addition to the fact that I just attract that audience based on the type of content I'm creating, I think also my message might have more fertile ground with that audience, because there's um, there fewer seeds have been sown in the past, so it gives me a lot of opportunity to sow many seeds myself.
yeah, and I noticed this in the beginning when we started defining what we wanted to do. And I noticed that segregation is sometimes a strategy that people implement in order to focus on a specific problem, but it's really hard to segregate men and women and also expect there to be a positive social transformation when men and women are both part of this situation that we're in right now. For example, like the strategies that some governments implement to protect women, where there's a bus or like a train section where only women go, and then the general population and men. Um, I understand that the immediate approach is to protect women, but in the long term, the message that you're sending is that it's impossible for us to interact in the same space without men inflicting this type of
This
harm
harm, right?
on women. Um,
Yeah.
and
So
I
it
think that
perpetuates the narrative that men are like harmful animals
they're
that are
animals.
totally instinctual and unable to control their compulsions and that kind of stuff.
Exactly. And we need to empower men, and we need to give men responsibility. We need men
Yeah.
to understand that they could be sexually aroused, but not be disrespectful or invasive or objectify another human being, because sexual arousal is completely natural, but imposing it on someone else isn't necessarily.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah. And like the perspective I take with all of my followers is you do have the choice to respect me, you know? Like you might have this like compulsion towards, sending me nasty things because it's what you've been doing your whole life. Maybe you were socialized from a young age to believe that this is like the way that you would get, a reputation in the world or whatever. But I believe maybe you've never been told that you are actually a free being with choices. But
mhm.
let me tell you, you are a free being with choices, and one of your choices is to respect me. You know.
I think that's
So
very powerful. And it's very, I'd like to watch how this plays out. And I'd like to talk to you about this in a couple of years and see if your experience was positive or not, or like where you evolved to decide, well, I tried this, didn't really work, or it didn't give me the desired outcome. So now I'm modifying it, because I feel like specifically these situations, um, there's a lot of experimenting involved, because we really don't know what's the correct way to handle it. Um, but I do feel that the naturism or social nudity in a mixed environment empowers both men and women. It empowers women to express themselves freely without being objectified, and it empowers men to have a healthy sexuality and not impose it on others, not be invasive, and not be, not like not. I think what I'm trying to say is that we've been educated as men to have a very harmful sexuality,
right.
destructive.
Yeah, yeah. And I mean, that's often how men get a reputation among their peers, right? Like how aggressive can you be? Like these are the things that you get clout for. Like,
Used to
you
be.
know, it used to be, and that's changing, thank goodness, you know. So the like where it takes generations to unravel the traumas that were created over generations, right? So like we'll be working on this, and I hope the generation that follows and follows and follows is like really active about trying to unwind these like intergenerational like systemic and traumatic issues. Yeah.
It's a very
Another
powerful
thing,
message. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
another thing that I think would be relevant to bring up at this moment is my pronouns that I use comfortably are she and they. So a certain part of my personality, a large part of my personality, I don't really relate to the feminine at all. Like what we now know about gender, thank goodness to like gender researchers and gender philosophers who mostly come out of women and gender studies. So there is like a feminist background to the study of this area. But gender is inherently performative. So sex, like biological sex, is like based on physical characteristics that exist on a spectrum. But gender is a performance. And so one of the things like I've desexualized my body in certain ways by showing and acting that I can be nude without it being sex. I can also be nude without it being womanly. My body is, has female biological characteristics. I have breasts, I have a vagina. I've never put it to the test, but I believe that I have a uterus. I probably like fit within that, in the bimodal distribution of biological sex. I probably fit in the typical characteristics of female biology. That being said, just because I have that female biology doesn't mean that I'm being a woman all the time, And for me, yoga is not a gendered experience. Yoga is, it just feels good. It's fitness, it's meditation. That's fitness and meditation are not masculine or feminine.
Yeah.
They can be if they are for you, but they're not inherently masculine or feminine. So even though I am a like public naked biological female, that doesn't mean that I'm always being a public naked woman.
Yeah, that's a very interesting message because we associate certain behaviors or certain expressions or certain preferences to a specific biological gender, when in reality, it doesn't necessarily, and it's arbitrary in a sense what you consider to be masculine or feminine or manly or womanly. It's like you're not man enough or you're not, woman enough. And I think going back to what I mentioned before, that what I like about naturism is that it's mainly like a pro-choice. You can choose what fits, what you like it's an a la carte experience. uh,
Hmm.
and I think that it goes very well with other expressions of being able to choose. And ultimately, if something doesn't work for you, why should you be conformed to it?
Exactly. Exactly. And I mean, there are experiences with my body and with nudity that are womanly experiences. So like the experience that I shared about me and some of my other female friends, like looking at one another's breasts to determine what was normal and what was not. I consider that a kind of womanly experience, or I felt like it was a womanly experience because we were sharing this common insecurity that exists in feminine circles. In feminine circles, it's super common to doubt your breasts, you know? So we were sharing this womanly experience. But when I'm teaching a yoga class, it doesn't feel that womanly to me. It's just a person thing, you know?
Hmm. Well, breast is just something that you have or you don't.
Yeah, 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 yeah. I think the thing that made that experience feel feminine and womanly, it wasn't like the breasts themselves. It was the kind of like sorority feeling that we had. It was the kind of social relationship that we were sharing with one another, the particular experience of intimacy that we were sharing in that moment um, kind of follows from a long line of like sisterliness, sorority, right? Which
This
is
is
why it was a
interesting.
womanly experience.
The interesting gender association to what you're explaining to me is I can imagine women showing their breasts to each other to see if there's anything wrong with their breast. But I don't know, or I can't imagine a scenario like where I'm hanging out with my friends and say, hey, let's see if our penises are weird or different or unusual, and just everyone showing their penis. I don't think that it would be wrong. It's just like maybe we've been conditioned as men to think that that's probably unacceptable, or I don't know. So that also influences on what you perceive to be normal, okay, or accepted, or so I do feel that the more we get rid of these associations, um, the more people can choose, and that probably would have been a good experience, like growing up with insecurities. If you have the, and I think that's another thing that social nudity really benefits us. We don't have a point of reference when it comes to bodies.
Hmm.
We The only bodies we see are in media or movies or pornography, and none of those represents real bodies. So
Hmm.
obviously you see yourself in the mirror and there's nothing like you're seeing on screen, so there has to be something wrong.
Right. Yeah, actually, the most recent piece of feminist literature that I read uh, is called The Beauty Myth by Naomi Wolf. And in her conclusions, one of the kind of remedies that she suggests for chronic body dysphoria in women is social nudity. She says there needs to be more circumstances in which real women with real bodies are nude together, saunas, beaches, A lot of people don't have a healthy relationship to their body because they don't have a healthy relationship to bodies in general.
Yeah. Yeah, and then there needs to be scenarios where a man and a woman, or however you identify, can interact with other people's bodies, and you can see that. Like, I think if you grow up as a child, as a boy, and you see your mom or your sister or your aunt or your cousins nude, it's going to be very hard to objectify other women that you see in similar circumstances, because you've learned to accept and respect the body and the person. And then, the fact that we don't have access to other people's bodies, like other people's nudity, creates, in my way of seeing it, a lot of social issues.
Yeah, yeah. There's this kind of push and pull. I think these kind of um, almost like a dichotomy between desire and disgust. Like desire is a draw towards, and disgust is a push away from. And
Mhm.
these are often the two words that are used to describe bodies. Oh, it's so sexy, I want that, right? Or ugh, disgusting, get that away from me.
Yeah.
And people will say that about bodies of very similar types. Like I'll, talk to a man. Have you ever seen your mom naked? Ew, gross. What are you talking about? Um, you see that hot girl over there? Would you want to see her naked? Oh yeah. You know, both of those are that's the polarization of an unhealthy relationship to bodies in general. A healthy relationship would be balanced. It would be, oh, yes or no to either question, like without that intensity of desire or the intensity of disgust.
I don't understand disgust. I've never felt disgust for like another human being's body. And that's another thing that I don't understand, why people feel the need to express. I think there's certain we sometimes confuse what is of public domain and what is of private domain. And I feel like, for example, we can complain that the street is, it has potholes or whatever, and it needs to be fixed, and we can complain, and the government's not doing their job, and blah blah blah, so I think blah blah blah. But when it comes to an individual, I have no authority over what that individual chooses to do with their hair, with their image, with their weight, with their. So I do think that there's levels of opinions that are more or less valuable. When it's something that affects all of us, they're very valuable. But when it's something that determines the appearance or life choices of another individual, they're completely irrelevant. So why do we
Mm-hmm.
feel the need to share the way we perceive somebody else's body, whether it's positive or negative? For me, it falls within the same ballpark, unless it's someone who is close to you. And there's, like, for example, if my wife asks me how do I look, or if I see her and I think she looks beautiful, I feel the confidence to share that with her, because there's an intimacy, and she might get gratification out of that. But I don't feel the same confidence of walking down the street and seeing an attractive woman and saying, wow, you're so beautiful, or you're so hot,
Mm-hmm.
or.
Yeah, yeah. It's a context dependent relationship, whether or not you can comment on the private life of an individual. You know, um, one of the things that you said there is like, why do people feel the need? Like, why do people feel the need to comment? And one of the theories that I've kind of developed is actually based on a theory of about anti-Semitism, which is by Jean-Paul Sartre. And he talks about, and then this will be like a very mangled version of like one book that I read a long time ago. But he talks about how the anti-Semite feels the need to create a system um, in which uh, people have, oh my gosh, how can I talk about this without totally mangling it? um, or and this applies across all sorts of racism.
Mhm.
The racist feels the need to judge people as inherently, so talking about worth rather than talking about actions or behavior. They need to devalue somebody on an inherent level so that they can raise them up themselves up on an inherent level. When the reality is that inherently, you could put it either way. You could say inherently people are nothing, or inherently people are infinite. But on either case, inherently all people are the same.
Hmm.
And so what differentiates us in the world is what we do. Do we provide value to others? Are we kind? Are we hateful? Are we harmful? And so the world is not even because of actions, right? Because of activity, not because of your inherent qualities. So one of the theories that I kind of brought in creating the Naked Yogi is that people who want to criticize other people's bodies and criticize their worth as something inherent, those are people who believe that their actions are not able to raise them up. So they've switched out truth for a lie. They've switched out the truth that your actions can make you valuable or less valuable, because they fear that their actions are not going to, give them the steps up that they want, you know? So part of the reason that I want to empower people, especially men, actually, part of the reason I want to empower men is because I want them to know that they have it within their ability, within their like existential existence, um, which is, yeah, they have it like existentially, they have the ability to do good and be worthy of good,
Hmm.
So they don't need to make inherent claims about women's bodies. They don't need to say that women are inherently, wrong, or bodies are inherently wrong, or this kind of thing. Those kinds of judgments are only necessary for somebody who is not secure in themselves.
Yeah.
So I want to empower people to be secure in themselves so that they no longer feel the need to talk on that level.
They probably feel unsatisfied with their physical appearance and maybe get some level of satisfaction out of making someone else feel worse about themselves. Like maybe evening out the playing field. Because what if you show them a body that's similar to their body? Or like the example that you said, what if you show a woman that has similar characteristics to your mom, and maybe she's attractive, but my mom is disgusting? Or maybe, this body type that looks like mine is disgusting and I don't like it because that's the way I feel about my body. And I think it's disgusting. So no one can have a body like mine and feel good about themselves because I don't feel good about myself. Is that,
Right.
yeah?
Yeah, exactly. And like people criticize all sorts of different body types, like people will criticize you if you get cosmetic surgery. People will criticize you if you're disabled. People will criticize bodies for all these types of things as if our bodies have anything to do with our worth,
Mm-hmm.
which they
Yeah.
don't, you know? Um, yeah, yeah. So it seems like people are taking they're just switching out the conversation that needs to be had. They're displaying their insecurity. And so we could talk at the level of worth. We could, if someone's willing to open their heart, we could talk at the level of worth. We could talk about pain, you know, and we could talk about joy. Or we could hide that, cover it, and close it, and talk about ability or appearance, you know? So like what I see when people are being critical of bodies is just that their heart is closed to the real issue, which is their own internalized pain, you know?
So it's a
So
mechanism of self-preservation, like you're protecting yourself by
yeah.
harming others.
Yeah. And because yoga is so healing both physically and mentally, my hope is that people that do take my classes will be able to like work through some of those layers of pain, and genuinely heal from them and let them go, so that they no longer need to be forces of harm in the world. They can become forces of good.
Yeah, and that takes me to another topic that's maybe a little bit different, but it has to do with how do you promote a body positive message that doesn't shame people that do decide to modify their body or that have very high intense workouts, diets, and so on. Like, how do you how do you send all bodies are beautiful message without falling into a fit negative or athletic negative message or a plastic surgery negative message? Like, we don't want people to feel so bad about their bodies that they think that the only way that they could feel good about them is having plastic surgery. But if someone has decided to have plastic surgery, then there shouldn't be anything wrong with that either. It's like, you didn't fail. You didn't, there's nothing wrong with you because you do have plastic surgery.
Hmm. I like to take a because I'm worth it type attitude, you know? So I exercise because I'm worth it. I don't exercise because I want to change myself. I exercise because I'm worth being healthy, you know? And all things can be because I'm worth it. You know, if you're really into cosmetic surgery, I get cosmetic surgery because I'm worth it, babe. Oh, you know? Like, and I work out because I'm worth it. You know, I'm gonna eat this cake because I'm worth it. And you know what? I'm gonna diet because I'm worth it. You know, like it's just changing the narrative to what am I changing to what am I celebrating, you
Mhm.
know? And with a fitness plan, you're celebrating your health, right? You're not um, criticizing your unhealth. You're celebrating the health that you do have, and you're building on the health that you do have. You know.
And that probably
So
applies
yeah.
to people who decide to, like, what if you don't want to have a healthy lifestyle? What if you want to eat everything that your heart desires and drink everything your heart desires? I also don't feel that there's anything wrong with that, because I believe that the individual has the choice to decide what they do with their bodies, whether it be something that could cause them harm or whether it could be something that provides them well-being. But regardless, it's your choice.
Yeah, exactly. And which is why yoga is not going to land with everybody. Like, not everybody um, wants to exercise, and not everybody wants to meditate. So, like, my demographic is not every single person on the planet,
Of course.
and that's fine. That's absolutely fine. My demographic is people who think that they're worth, who use yoga as a tool to express their abundance and their worth and their love. Which is why, I mean, something that I did very early on, which was a request from a subscriber, was like yoga for weight loss. And I've received this request a few times because people, you know, they want to lose weight, and it can be a very self-loving thing. They're like, you know what? My body hasn't been able to do everything that I want it to, but I believe that I'm worth the effort. I believe that I'm worth health. I believe that I'm worth mobility. So I want to lose some of this weight. So one of the things that I'm working on as a teacher is using language that allows people of all varieties to be empowered. So you can be empowered in your weight loss journey, but I might not use the language of weight loss, you know, and that's fine. And so, like, one of the things that I'm learning to do as a teacher is to incorporate cues for bodies that are different than mine. So, for example, like when I'm folding forward, um, because I'm thin, it's very easy for me to fold forward. But what I recently learned is that people that have a bigger belly, sometimes their belly will get in the way of them folding forward. So I can add a cue like, if you have a belly, just widen your legs and adjust your belly in between, and just do it in a non-shameful way. Not like, oh, if you're fat, do this, or not that fat's a bad word, but like not
Yeah.
use any words that might indicate shame. Just be like, oh, if you have this quality in your body, you can modify in this way without it being negative at all.
Yeah, I can relate to that because I have this idea of it doesn't matter what you choose to do because you have the choice. So it's not good or bad. It's just your choice that has consequences. And I was having, during the first months of the quarantine, I was drinking and eating a lot, and it was great, but I was gaining a lot of weight. And that wasn't necessarily the problem. The problem was that my quality of life was going down. I was feeling more anxious. I wasn't getting quality sleep. I, just the stress was accumulating, and a lot of things, like I would, if I would have to go up and down the stairs to go to the kitchen, and like going up the stairs was like, so then
Right.
I was thinking about, so imagine when I get out of lockdown, I want to travel. I want to explore, I want to hike, I want to do a lot of things, and my body is not in the situation that I needed to be in order to accomplish that. So my motivation was, what changes can I do in my life in order for my body to be ready for what I need it to be ready to do? Like when the time comes, will it be able to provide me what I need it to do? And in the meantime, is it possible for me to improve my quality of life? And that took me to have a healthier diet, to drink much less. I like drinking. I don't want to get rid of it, but I don't
Hmm.
want it to affect my quality of life, um, and exercise and so on. So that's but I was also hesitant and worried about, like, okay, so what if I do manage to get a very fit body? Does that take away from my message that all bodies are good? Because then it's the narrative that, oh, because you're thin or because you're athletic or because you're whatever, then you can do it. But me, like, I consider myself to be fit or athletic or whatever. So your message is no longer accessible.
Yeah. Yeah. This is something that I am like working to learn more about based on like the media that I consume and the books that I read is like how to be body positive in an appropriate way as a thin person. Because like we live in a culture that creates like limits around big sized bodies. You know, it's harder to move around in restaurants, it's harder to, you know, take transit, you know, these kinds of things. Like we have a society that is built for thin bodies. So when I talk about being positive, body positive, it's like, okay, well, what culture are you going up against? You
Mhm.
know, like my body fits within the dominant culture. So I mean, I can't show that my experience is of like becoming body positive in a fat body. But my experience of becoming body positive in my own body, um, can welcome fat people into it. So one of the things that has to be really important for me internally, and this is like not something that's going to show so much in the way that I teach, but is am I afraid of being fat? Because if I'm afraid of being fat, then I'm not body positive. You know, body positive is for every single body. So
Mhm.
if I'm afraid of my body changing, I'm not body positive. So I need to be positive about the way that my body is and every way that my body will be in the future, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, and also you have to understand that there's different stages in life, and maybe right now you're prioritizing um, athleticism or a specific type of eating. I don't know. I don't think regimen is correct, but like you said that you sometimes or most of the time you eat vegetarian or vegan, but you don't consider yourself to be that because it locks you into something. Um, I think the same way that our bodies evolve and how they change over time. Maybe sometimes you can be overweight and you're still body positive. Maybe sometimes you can be fit and you're still body positive. And being body positive doesn't necessarily mean that athletic people are body positive and fat people are body negative, because that's also not true. I've encountered a lot of people that are very athletic, and I talk to them about social nudity, and they're like, no, like
Mm-hmm.
that. And when you ask them why, they talk about their body insecurities, and you look at them and you're like, well, you seem to me to be according to the norm, but they don't necessarily feel that way. And there's other cases where people have aren't athletic, are probably overweight, and they feel super comfortable with their body and it doesn't matter to them. So
Mm-hmm.
we have to also deassociate this fitness or plastic surgery or things like that. Some people with plastic surgeries have insecurities. Some people with plastic surgeries don't.
Mm-hmm. And it's the same thing with cosmetics. Like, um, so I'm a bit of a minimalist. So usually when I read a book, I give it away to somebody whose life it will enrich rather than just like stockpiling books in my life. So after I read The Beauty Myth, I sent it to a friend of mine whose physical expressions are just vastly different. I don't wear any makeup. This friend of mine wears makeup, a lot of makeup every single day. I don't wear products in my hair. This friend like styles their hair every single day, you know? I wear like all of my clothes. I have like very small wardrobe and everything is just black. It's very simple. And this friend is very fashionable. And part of the reason that I sent the book to her in particular was that I realized over the course of reading it that sometimes I was judgmental towards other people's way of loving themselves, you know? And loving yourself is not about not wearing makeup. It's about loving yourself, you know? So if you love yourself while wearing makeup, wear makeup. If you love yourself, you know, while getting surgery, get surgery. If you love yourself with your scars, you know, like just no matter what your circumstances, the point of loving yourself is loving yourself. It's not all of these peripheral issues that get pulled into the conversation.
Okay, so I think we've covered most, or I think all the topics that I wanted to talk to you about. Is there anything else that you would like us to go into?
No, I mean, I'm just like really grateful to have this conversation. Like I've been aware of you online since the beginning, and you're just like absolutely as pleasant in person as I expected.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I appreciate that you've accepted the invitation, and I want to take this time again to tell people that they could find you in allmylinks.com/ the naked yogi. There you could find Patreon, OnlyFans, Twitter, Vimeo, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok. And if any other new social media comes out, I'm pretty sure it's going to be there as well. And I'm also going to
Absolutely.
share those links on the description of this video and on the tweets and whatever I share. Um, Sarah Jane, thank you for accepting this invitation, for being part, I really enjoy the openness and the kindness of the conversation, the non-judgmental vibe that you have. And I'm very happy that you stumbled across naked yoga, and I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you feel welcome in the community and continue to take part in it. And I'm just glad to have you.
Yeah, I'm grateful to be here, and I hope we get to meet in person someday.
Someday, hopefully, once the travel restrictions are lifted, we definitely want to continue exploring the world. There's something very awesome about going to other countries and seeing how their communities work, like the events, going to the beaches, just learning of all the variety. For me, it's very enriching, and it gives me new ideas of things that I can implement here at home. So if the opportunity exists, you can be sure that we'll either visit you or maybe you can visit us.
Yeah, totally.
All right. So thank you guys, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care.